Ron Paul going bankrupt right now at Turkey, but is America going bankrupt later? Happenings in Turkey parallel the policies of the U.S. government of the last 10 years. Here is what is going on and why it could be coming to the U.S. President Trump recently imposed sanctions on Turkey to protest the Turkish government's detention of an American pastor. Turkey has responded by increasing tariffs on U.S. exports. The trade war is being blamed for the collapse of Turkey's currency, the lira. While the sanctions may have played a role, Turkey's currency crisis is rooted in the Turkish government's fiscal and monetary policies. In the past 7 years, Turkey's central bank has tripled the money supply and pushed interest rates down to 4.5%. While Turkey's government did not adopt Ben Bernanke's proposal to drop money from helicopters, Turkish politicians have taken advantage of easy money policies to increase subsidies for key voting blocs and special interests. The results of the Turkish government's inflation-fueled spending binge are not surprising to anyone familiar with Austrian economics or economic history. Turkey is now plagued with huge deficits, a collapsing currency, and a looming economic crisis, making it the next candidate for a European Union or Federal Reserve bailout. Turkey's combination of low interest rates, money creation, and massive government spending to stimulate the economy parallels the policies the U.S. government has pursued for the past 10 years. Without drastic changes in fiscal and monetary policies, economic trouble in America is around the corner. The very large and growing federal debt will cause a major crisis as the government's debt burden will be unsustainable. Instead of cutting spending or raising taxes, politicians can be expected to pressure the Federal Reserve to do their dirty work for them via inflation. We may even see the Fed experiment with negative interest rates, which would punish Americans for saving. The monetization of the federal debt will erode the dollar's purchasing power and decimate middle and working-class Americans, who are already seeing any gains in their incomes eaten away by inflation. If we are lucky, the next Fed-caused downturn will cause only a resurgence of 1970-style stagflation. The more likely scenario is the type of widespread economic chaos not seen in America since the Great Depression. The growth of cultural Marxism, the widespread entitlement mentality, and the willingness of partisans of various sides to use force against their political opponents suggests that this economic crisis will result in civil unrest that will be used to justify new crackdowns on individual liberty. Those who understand the causes of and cures for our current predicament have two responsibilities. First, prepare a plan to protect your family when the crisis occurs. Second, do all you can to spread the truth in hopes the liberty movement reaches critical mass so it can force Congress to make the changes necessary to avert disaster. Since the crisis will result in a rejection of the dollar as world reserve currency status, individuals should consider alternatives such as gold and other precious metals. Restoring a free market monetary system should be a priority for the liberty movement. Other priorities include ending our interventionist foreign policy, cutting spending in all areas, rolling back the surveillance state, protecting all civil liberties, and auditing and ending the Federal Reserve. If we do our jobs, we can build a society of peace, prosperity, and liberty, atop the ashes of the welfare warfare state. Are Turkey and the USA on a collision course? Not necessarily. Where are we headed? The Brunson crisis has gone on for several weeks. Does Erdogan really think Trump will concede? Modern Turkey was founded by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, father of the Turks, in 1923, after the fall of the Ottoman Empire during WWI 1917. He led Turkey into the modern age by abandoning Islam and using constitutional and governmental means to force a secular nationalist agenda on the country's citizens. The secular state allowed many of the things prohibited by Islam, such as the sale of alcoholic beverages and their consumption in public, civil marriages, casinos, and betting, while some of the things permitted by Islam became illegal, such as polygamy and child marriage. As the years passed, the demographic makeup of the country changed, and the mostly liberal and secular urban public declined in number due to a lower birth rate and high rate of immigration, while the rural public, more traditional and religiously observant, increased and gained strength due to its high birth rate and low level of immigration. This cultural change was reflected in the 1996 elections when Nekmet Erbakan, head of the Islamic Welfare Party, was elected prime minister and deposed in 1997. The following year, Erbakan's pupil, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, head of the Justice and Development Party, was elected prime minister in March 2003 and served for 2 terms until August 2014, when he was elected president, one whose authority is steadily expanding as time goes on. The renewal of an Islamist party regime in a state which had an 80-year tradition of a secular government caused consternation in the West among leaders, journalists, intellectuals, and academics who feared a Turkish version of the 1979 Iranian Revolution that brought Khomeini to power. In order to calm them down, Erdogan decided to play both sides simultaneously, at least in public, playing both sides in the religious sphere. In order to assuage the fears of those inside Turkey and outside of it who were concerned about his becoming president, Erdogan ran a clever election campaign which included holding a press conference during daylight hours in the month of the Ramadan fast, where he enjoyed a sandwich in full view of the assembled photographers and media representatives. Audible sighs of relief were heard worldwide, with no one understanding that this did not prevent him from simultaneously being a Muslim Brotherhood Islamist, and in fact, some time later, Erdogan admitted that the sandwich was a publicity stunt meant to soothe Western nerves. Playing both sides in the military sphere. Turkey is a full-fledged member of NATO and an honorary member from its founding. The Incirlik Air Base in Turkey was the front-line position of NATO forces against the USSR, and U-2 and SR-71 planes took off from the base to missions above the USSR and its Warsaw Pact allies, without any of those countries being capable of intercepting the high-flying planes. When the Islamist party took over the Turkish regime, Turkey's relations with the West became complicated, starting with the Erdogan regime's decision to stop NATO forces from invading Iraq from Turkish soil. This came as a great surprise to the U.S., causing a major change in the plans for the Second Gulf War. Erdogan did not leave NATO, but did not cooperate with any of the organization's military plans in any Islamic state, Iraq, Afghanistan, or Syria. Simultaneously, a member and a non-participant. Playing both sides, relations with Middle Eastern states. Turkey is attempting to gain recognition as a regional power overseeing the area's other countries on the basis of 1. Its national pride, 2. 400 years of historical consciousness as an empire, 1517 to 1917, and 3. Political Islamic ideology which led Erdogan to believe that he alone is fulfilling Allah's will. The Arab regimes have understood Erdogan's motives since 2003, and he has them greatly concerned. Bashar Assad had an excellent relationship with him until 2011, with the need for visas waived for Turks visiting Syria, and vice versa. This is unusual in Arab states, where a visa is always necessary to travel from one to another. Erdogan blew a fuse, however, when Assad the Allied began butchering his Sunni Muslim citizens, and particularly Muslim Brotherhood members, Erdogan's ideological brothers. At that point, all the former agreements vanished into thin air, and in 2014, Erdogan even supported ISIS. Erdogan has a dual relationship with Egypt as well. He wholeheartedly supported Morsi, Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood president, from late June 2012 till early July 2013, and has an ongoing feud with al-Sisi, who deposed Morsi. This is not about the relations between Turkey and Egypt, but is concentrated on the personal relationship between Erdogan and whoever rules Egypt. Everything is personal and revolves around the ideological preferences of one person, Erdogan. Erdogan's special love is reserved for Hamas, the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Erdogan supports and helps them wholeheartedly in every way he can, although he is careful not to transfer funds to them so as not to go up against a U.S. law that forbids transferring funds to Hamas as they are listed as a terrorist organization. The most extreme incident was the Mavi Marmara, the Turkish ship filled with IHH terrorists that tried to sail through the blockade on Gaza in May 2010. On the one hand, Erdogan has diplomatic relations with Israel, and on the other, he supports those who call for its destruction. Playing both sides when it comes to Israel, Erdogan plays both sides in other ways. Turkish construction companies, headed by Yilmaz, build upscale office buildings in the center of Tel Aviv. Turkish factories manufacture clothes, food, and electric appliances for Israeli companies. On the other hand, however, Erdogan sends tens of millions of dollars to support Islamic resistance to Israeli rule in East Jerusalem, an inseparable part of Israel's capital, its faith, and history. Playing both sides in Europe and the US. Erdogan's dream is to be accepted to the European Union so that he can reap economic benefits from joining one of the world's strongest and largest economic bodies. Up until the economic crisis of 2008, Erdogan was insulted to the depths of his soul if some European leader said something against Turkey joining the EU, because he realized that Europe did not want to give him the opportunity to export millions of Muslims to Europe and speed up its Islamization. On the other hand, when Greece was in dire economic straits and needed massive European economic aid, Erdogan was glad not to be an EU member. The last thing he wants to do is to help the Greek Christians he hates so much. He wants to be accepted to the EU, but not really. Then came the migrant wave of 2015 that flooded Europe, with over 1 million refugees, some of them Syrian, but most of them Iraqi, Afghan, or Pakistanis, who, if they managed to survive crossing the Aegean Sea, landed in small, rickety boats on the Greek coast. Where did they sail from? Syria? Iraq? Not at all. They embarked on the dangerous sea journey from Turkey, the country they fled to from their collapsing states. According to international law, the minute a refugee arrives in a functioning state, he may not be expelled from it and must be granted refuge within its borders. In other words, all the hundreds of thousands of refugees who reached Greece were sent on their way by Turkey, which is not in a state of war. Do you get it? Erdogan, the celebrated Islamist, sent hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children, the overwhelming majority of them Muslim, to drown. Remember the little boy with the red shirt lying on the shore? Or to reach heretic European states. Why didn't the Europeans stop the Erdogan-created migrant wave before it hit their shores? Who knows? Later on, they paid him €1 billion to stop the migration from Turkey to Europe. He took the money and continued sending migrants. Why? Because that is the way to turn Europe into a Muslim continent. Why did he want to do this? Because he is an Islamist. Then US President Barack Obama said not a word against Erdogan and the wave of immigrants he created. Conspiracy theorists will tell you that Obama, like Erdogan, wanted Europe to become Islamic. The extensive reports in the media about the refugee wave helped Trump win the election because he spoke of stopping the lesser wave of migrants that reached North America. Trump knew who was responsible for the wave of migrants, and it makes sense to infer that his opinion of Erdogan already began to be forged during that period. The personal aspect of the issue cannot be ignored. Trump and Erdogan are both extremely sure of themselves and their ideas, two men whose style of leadership is at once personal, loud and emotional. They both love to speak straight to their supporters, rallying them to whatever cause they are espousing, and radicalizing their opinions. The chance that the two will have a head-on collision is the same as the probability that two billy goats trying to cross a narrow bridge from opposing ends will bump into one another. Trump's opinion of Islamist leaders is well known. He has the same level of affection for Erdogan as he has for the Iranian mullahs, but instead of taking that into account, Erdogan has done everything he can to infuriate the US president. In Syria, Erdogan collaborates with the Russians, says nothing about the heavy bombing that shattered the US-supported anti-Assad forces, and battles the Syrian Kurds, although he is aware that the US that armed them so they would fight ISIS. Erdogan came out loudly and publicly against Trump's decision to move the US embassy to Jerusalem, and once it was a fait accompli, called a conference of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation representing 57 Islamic states in order to condemn Trump's action and work against it. What was he thinking? That Trump would send a recorded blessing to the conference? That's when the Pastor Brunson issue surfaced. Erdogan has had him incarcerated since 2016, at first in prison and now under house arrest for allegedly taking part in the rebellion against the government. I do not know what really happened there, but it seems that Trump simply does not believe that a Christian leader whose activities are totally religion-oriented would take part in a military coup. Trump convinced Israel to release a woman suspected of transferring funds to Hamas, expecting the quid pro quo to be Brunson's release, but that did not happen. What was Erdogan thinking? That a leader whose voters are in large part evangelists would give up the efforts to release an evangelist pastor. Yet the Brunson crisis has gone on for several weeks. Does Erdogan really think Trump will concede? Trump took the economic steps he knows how to do without burning all his bridges, from sanctions against 2 ministers to a tax on metals. These are sanctions that can be stopped in a moment, but Erdogan has not given in and is ready to sacrifice his country's economy on the altar of his inflated ego. The Turkish lira is in a state of collapse. The stock market has crashed. Qatar, another terror and Muslim Brotherhood sponsoring country, is offering aid, but Erdogan has not yet freed Brunson. Where are we headed? It looks as though there are behind-the-scenes contacts, whose goal is to find a solution. But it is clear that Trump does not see Erdogan as a partner, despite his formal NATO membership. He may even have given the USAF orders to prepare for the day Erdogan expels the US from Incirlikiyas. Even that is being talked about by some voices in Turkey. It is possible that some kind of solution will be found, one that allows both leaders to preserve their honor and images. It will not be easy, but from this important podium I would like to humbly suggest a solution to the two of them. Brunson has a weak heart. He is beginning to feel ill. His health is deteriorating, and his LLF is endangered. Erdogan can arrange the patient's medical transfer to Europe as a life-saving goodwill gesture, and after 2 days of tests in the U.S. Army hospital in Germany, Trump can remove the sanctions, welcome Brunson, and let Erdogan come out a winner as well. Playing both sides again, but so what? Trump vows no concessions with Turkey over detained U.S. pastor. President Donald Trump on Monday ruled out making any concessions to Turkey to gain the freedom of a detained American pastor. Trump, speaking to Reuters in an Oval Office interview, said he thought he had a deal with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan when he helped persuade Israel to free a detained Turkish citizen. Trump has imposed tariffs on imports of Turkish steel and aluminum in response to Erdogan's refusal to free Brunson, raising concerns of economic damage in Europe. President Donald Trump on Monday ruled out making any concessions to Turkey to gain the freedom of a detained American pastor, and said he was not concerned that retaliatory tariffs he imposed will have a ripple effect and hurt the European economy. Trump, speaking to Reuters in an Oval Office interview, said he thought he had a deal with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan when he helped persuade Israel to free a detained Turkish citizen. He had thought Erdogan would then release Pastor Andrew Brunson. I think it's very sad what Turkey is doing. I think they're making a terrible mistake. There will be no concessions, he said. Trump has imposed tariffs on imports of Turkish steel and aluminum in response to Erdogan's refusal to free Brunson, raising concerns of economic damage in Europe. I'm not concerned at all. I'm not concerned. This is the proper thing to do, he said, when asked about the potential damage to other economies. Trump said Erdogan had wanted the Turkish citizen returned from Israel. Trump and Erdogan met in Brussels for a NATO summit in mid-July, where they discussed Brunson's case and what could be the way forward to release the pastor, a senior White House official said earlier. Turkey had sought U.S. help to persuade the Israelis to release a Turkish woman who was being held in Israel, the senior official said. In exchange, Turkey would release Brunson and other Americans being held in Turkey. Trump said he kept his side of the bargain. I got that person out for him. I expect him to let this very innocent and wonderful man, and great father, and great Christian, out of Turkey, Trump said. Israel, which confirmed that Trump had requested Brunsson's release, deported her on July 15. Ankara has denied ever agreeing to free Brunson in return. Trump added, I like Turkey. I like the people of Turkey very much. Until now I had a very good relationship, as you know, with the president. I got along with him great. I had a very good relationship. But it can't be a one-way street. It's no longer a one-way street for the United States. Trump had suggested earlier this month he would be willing to meet Iranian President Hassan Rouhani if the Iranians wanted to discuss the dispute over Iran's nuclear program. The Iranians, including Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, have shrugged off the offer. Asked to respond to Iran's refusal to meet, Trump said it not matter to him whether they met or not. Turkish steel exporters set eyes on Far East, South American markets after U.S. tariff hikes. In the face of additional U.S. tariffs on Turkish steel and aluminum, exporters are looking to explore alternative markets in the Far East and South America. The move comes after U.S. President Donald Trump announced on Twitter on August 10 that he had approved a doubling of tariffs on steel and aluminum from Turkey. Speaking to Anadolu Agency, Aegean Ferrous and Non-Ferrous Metals Exporters Association Chairman Yalk Enerton said that Turkey is the world's 8th largest and Europe's 2nd largest producer of steel. He said that the sector is growing with new investments every day. According to Turkish Exporters Assembly, steel exports reached $8.36 billion in the January-July period this year, with a 27% rise compared to the same period last year. During this period, the largest export destination for Turkish steel was Italy. It was followed by the U.S., with $552 million. Exports to Far Eastern countries and South American countries, which have been set as the new targets by exporters, stood at $160 million and $225 million, respectively. Enerton said that the sector exported 1.9 million tons of steel to the U.S. last year. He noted that there is a commercial decline around the globe due to the recent U.S. stance. After this implementation, our steel exports to the U.S. have become more difficult. However, we can easily close the gap with exports to Far Eastern and South American countries, he said. He said that the sector is accustomed to this kind of practice, and this has actually given them some sense of defiance. Like a frontiersman, we can travel all over the world with a bag and sell Turkish steel to the rest of the world, he added. He said that steel exports to the South American market have gained momentum in recent months, and added that exports to Brazil rose by 159% to $30 million in the first 7 months of the year. Significant increases have also been recorded in exports to countries like Honduras, Paraguay, and Panama, Enerton said. He claimed that the increase in these markets will continue. There is a gap in Far East countries emanating from China heading to its own domestic market. Turkish exporters will fill this gap. Enerton said that Turkish steel entered the U.S. market in 1985 and is one of the most commonly used steels there, both in terms of quality and price. He stressed that U.S. companies prefer Turkish steel. But since Turkish steel does not go there, and the U.S. steel production does not meet local demands, steel prices in the U.S. have gone up, pushing it to import more.